Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video is a very exciting one because I have a rather massive book haul. This year I've really been trying to restrain myself a bit. I've cut down my book hauls almost 100%. I do them bi-monthly now as I'm really trying to work through my TBR, and for the most part I've been successful. But listen, it's my birthday. There have been so many amazing summer releases. I have quite a bit of books to show off today, but many of them are on my priority TBR for the rest of the year, so I feel okay about it. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. Starting off with some very exciting new releases, the first book I have to mention is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. Great news, I have already read this book, so hey, I'm knocking down some of my newly purchased reads off of the list. But this is V.E. Schwab's newest release that centers vampires, specifically three different women from three different time periods, one in the 1500s, one in the 1800s, and then finally the last in present day, all of their individual human and then ultimately vampire journeys and how their stories and lives become intertwined. It is very dark, very delicious. I was hooked, honestly, from page one. Writing style is fantastic. If you love Interview with a Vampire vibes, this is the book for you. And this is very vampire-y, which honestly, finally, I feel like I have been teased with vampire reads in the last couple of years, and this really, really wholly delivers on that trope and concept. Perfect for upcoming fall TBRs, if I do say so myself. But obviously I bought this, and hey, I already read it. Similarly, I also picked up and read The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. Rachel Gillig is probably one of the most popular romantasy or romance-leaning fantasy writers at the moment. This is her new gothic medieval release following our main character, Sybil, who is a diviner, and she has basically been raised in this remote monastery amongst her sisters, and she is drowned for money to give out prophecies to people seeking to divine their future. And then one day, an unexpected convoy in night enters her home, and everything begins to change from there. Romance, mystery. My favorite part of this book is definitely the austere medieval setting. I felt like the vibes were very strong, and I did like this more than Two Dark Windows, so for me, I was pretty entertained. New release I have not gotten to yet, but has quickly climbed to the very top of my TBR based on so many positive comments I've gotten about this book from you guys. That book is The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. This book sounds like it's full of everything I love within fantasy books and stories. It is a castle politics-centered fantasy novel full of political intrigue. Specifically, it's set in an empire that's had 24 years of peace, but now the ruler of this kingdom is looking to step down, and now a competition between 7 very smart, heroic, and capable individuals is about to begin. But before the competition starts, one of them ends up dead, and now a conspiracy is beginning to unwind within the castle. Enter in our main character, who is known as a brilliant but also very strange high scholar of this court, and it's up to her to figure out what in the world is going on. A murder mystery that also centers political intrigue in a fantasy world and setting. I am sold. This also has such a high rating on Goodreads. I'm really hoping I'm gonna love this. Perhaps a new favorite for the year. It's also chunky, so I feel like we're gonna have plenty of space to explore these ideas and concepts. I need to get to this soon. The next book I have to show off, another one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and was sent to me by the publisher, so thank you so much to them. And that book is A Witch's Guide to Magical Inkeeping. This is a companion novel to Soooooo Madonna's first release, which is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, which is a cozy fantasy story that I loved so much. So needless to say, I'm very much looking forward to picking up this companion book and listening to the audiobook and doing a puzzle and having a nice cozy evening in. This follows our main character, Sarah, and Sarah was once one of the most powerful witches in all of Britain until one day she resurrected her recently deceased aunt, lost her powers, and was also exiled from the guild. Now she sort of begrudgingly helps her recently resurrected aunt run this magical inn and basically deal with all different types of quirky characters. One day though, she stumbles upon the possibility of a spell that could help restore her powers, but then a new guest arrives who is a grumpy magical historian, and obviously the story begins to kick off from there. I love Soooooo Madonna's writing. I love her character work. I love her world building from a fantasy point of view too. It's such a great mix of things. I already know this is going to be so endearing, and I truly cannot wait to read it. I'm thrilled. The next book I grabbed was Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill. This is another cozy centered fantasy story. This story first introduces us to our main character, Jenny Greenteeth, who is a monster that lives beneath the surface of a lake. And one day our other main character is thrown into this lake because she is a witch and she was basically betrayed by her small town. And instead of eating her, which is typically what Jenny would do, she decides to save her. And she also begins to learn more about this witch's past, her hometown, and perhaps I think they begin to work together and go on a quest to possibly save the day for this village. Again, this just sounds like a great combination of maybe romance or at least found family. I love the setting of this, and the concept that our main character is literally like a lake monster really appeals to me. So I will let you know, I definitely want to have a bit of a cozy reading marathon soon. Next up, I also grabbed A Far Better Thing by H.G. Perry. The tagline of this book just absolutely sold me when I was looking for something to buy at Barnes & Noble. Essentially, this is a fae-centered story described to be a very intriguing fantasy combination of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell and Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. This book apparently really has the dark, sinister side of fae center stage, which personally very much appeals to me. It's also set during the Reign of Terror and shuttles between London and Paris. So the historical setting of this is also very, very fascinating. But we follow our main character, Sydney, who was kidnapped by fairies as a child and is forced to work alongside them. But now he's looking to rise up and get the revenge he has always wanted. I feel like this is going to be dark and sinister. I'm really curious to see how the historical time period is going to influence the story too. I feel like this could be so, so good. Then I grabbed The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss. This was nominated for the Nebula Award, and when I looked more into the synopsis, it also felt like, again, a historical fantasy story that sounds very appealing to me. This seems to be bringing together some very famous figures from literature and lore, kind of having a gothic London setting. Specifically, we follow our main character who is an orphan, and she begins to look into the mysterious passing of her parents, which leads her to one of her father's very close friends, Dr. Hyde. When she begins to try to figure out more about this figure, she runs into his near feral daughter who's been left to be raised by nuns, now working with each other and also working alongside Sherlock and Watson. They begin to investigate like this larger conspiracy. A lot going on in that synopsis. Obviously, again, pulling in some very famous figures. I love a mystery. I love this setting and concept. And again, historical fantasy is like one of my favorite things. A finalist for the Nebula Award. I have hope that this will be excellent. The next book I grabbed is the second book to a duology I'm currently reading and really enjoying, and that is The Shadowed Sun by N.K. Jemisin. This is a sequel to The Killing Moon, which was a fantastic first installment to the series by one of my all-time favorite authors. The Killing Moon is essentially set in this ancient fantasy landscape where here peace rules above all, and the pursuit of maintaining this peace is paramount for this culture and this government. To achieve this, they basically have these magical individuals roam the rooftops at night, and they can basically see into everyone's dreams. And they also impart to most civilians peace and rest, but in some cases they kill those that they feel are contrary to the government at large. But the city and some of our main characters are rocked at the beginning of book one when a conspiracy is uncovered and things devolve quickly. The first one was so unbelievably intense. It was also very, very political, and we had such an interesting mix of characters. I would also say the magic system is kind of giving like N.K. Jemisin's interpretation on vampires. It was all very, very, very interesting. I loved book one, so obviously I needed to get book two and hopefully pick it up soon. I'm hoping before the end of this year. Another sequel I picked up was the Justad Crown by Sarah Hashem. This, of course, is the sequel to the Justad Heir, which is a romantasy or romance-leaning fantasy story that I actually really enjoyed, particularly because I actually felt like it had a strong enemies to lovers plotline, meaning that it literally centers two people from opposing sides that has a very complicated and tenuous and violent history, raised to also despise each other. You watch them have to work alongside each other in forced proximity and also battle with their complicated feelings in an agonizingly slow fashion. I feel like often enemies to lovers is more like a setup to a romance story where they kind of have some vocal sparring within the first 50 pages. They don't like each other. Also, very quickly in those stories, you often see those two characters that are supposed to hate each other quickly begin to like each other, but I feel like this series really ups the ante on the enemies to lovers and really showcases the dissonance and the emotional turmoil that these feelings are creating within each character and how confusing that is. And it does create some rather delicious tension alongside what I feel like is some fantastic character work. I will say the fantasy plotline is a little convoluted. We have a legacy of magic and kingdoms kind of warring against each other and now subjugating each other. We have main characters who come from different kingdoms who now have to like participate in a competition together. Again, the backdrop is secondary to what I feel like is some very fantastic character work and some very fun romance between our two leads. So I'm excited to see how the story is going to continue to play out. The next book I picked up is another new release that has some classic fantasy elements that really appeals to me, and that is The Witch Roads. This is a quest-centered story, but I do feel like it has a bit of a twist to it. It opens up with a very arrogant prince and his posse going on a quest in the woods, and they basically bring along a courier to help lead them through this very treacherous landscape. And that person, Elan, is our main character, who has a very sunny and positive disposition. However, though they reach this sort of ominous location, our main character warns the prince to not enter the spires. He, of course, does not heed her advice. He goes in with his posse and he comes back a literal shell of who he once was. And now the responsibility of like survival in this dangerous place has fallen to our main character, who obviously was not prepared for this situation. I feel like this is going to have, again, some classic fantasy elements, given that it's centering a quest in a magical forest, but it also maybe appears that it's going to have some aspect of horror. I'm not totally sure, but I really love that the synopsis is very much just a setup, and I really have no clear idea like what is going to transpire throughout the rest of this journey, and I am intrigued. My curiosity has been piqued, and I want to read this quite soon. The next book I picked up sounds like the dark academia fantasy novel of my dreams. That is The Incandescent by Emily Tesh. This is described for fans of like the Schoolomance series by Naomi Novik mixed with plain bad heroines, and specifically it is a sapphic dark academia like demonic story. All of those buzzwords I want. Like, say no more. I bought this book. I will be reading this book in the fall. But more specifically, we're first introduced to one of our main characters who's like a very talented magic user, and they've also bound a very powerful demonic entity to a tattoo on their arm, and now they're back teaching at the magical school they once attended as a very competent new professor. We also follow our other main character, who may have just become aware of a very powerful demonic threat threatening the school at large, and now all of the teachers, including our other main character, have to work together. Sounds complicated. Demonic, dark magic, magic school setting. Again, I just feel like this could be fantastic. I hope it's lyrical, I hope it's dark and dramatic, and I hope the romance is spectacular. The next book I have to show off is another new release by a very well-known author. Again, there's just been so many amazing new releases. And that is The Listeners by Maggie Stiefvater. I do believe this is Maggie Stiefvater's first adult like literary fiction novel, but what I've read of hers in the YA sphere, her writing style is so lush and beautiful that I feel like it could translate quite well to this other genre. The setup of this book also sounds quite wild. It opens up in 1942 and we're introduced to our main character, who is the manager at this very luxurious hotel, which is a very remote property in West Virginia. This hotel is owned by some European aristocrats, but it's run by a bunch of locals who are from in and around the area that the hotel was founded in, which includes our main character. Again, this book is set in 1942, and the owners of this hotel have decided to make a deal with the Axis powers and basically hosting a summit for Nazis at their property. Obviously, all of the individuals working at this hotel realize that they've essentially been put in a very perilous situation and are not quite sure what to do. Enter in our other main character, who is a undercover CIA operative who I think is there to spy on this summit. And I think our two main characters begin to intertwine from there. Obviously, this book is called The Listeners, so I feel like there's going to be an element of like spying and undercover work. There's clear class commentary going on as well. And it also says this offers a fascinating glimpse into the horrors of history and a haunting tale of loyalty and courage, a marvel of storytelling. And this is also my July online book club pick, so I'm really excited to read and discuss it with you guys too. The next book was actually a recommendation from one of my friends. She said it seemed like the perfect combination of weird and horrifying I tend to like, and that that is Lap Nova. And honestly, reading over the synopsis, I think my friend was very, very correct. And this basically follows our main character, Little Merrick, who is the abused and delusional son of a shepherd living in a very small and remote village. Here, the only place he can kind of find some solace is with the blind midwife in town. However, though, it says that this woman's ability to receive transmissions of sacred knowledge from the natural world is a godsend. For others, though, Nina's home in the woods is a godless place. And then from there, I believe our main character finds himself in the midst of a power struggle between some ideas of faith and the faithlessness within this particular community. I think this is going to center like pagan religious horror in some capacity. I'm very curious about the setup. The synopsis, while not very clear to me exactly what in the world is going on, did intrigue me. I feel like this is going to be a very strange ride, which, you know, I do tend to like. The next book I picked up, I feel like I've suddenly been seeing everywhere, which was surprising because I feel like I've never heard of it, but there are so many books out in this series, and it's also super popular. So I honestly have no idea how this book just continually failed to enter my radar, but now it has, and I picked up book 1, and I'm very curious about it and excited to get to it soon. And that book is Dungeon Crawler Carl. And again, like, how could I possibly miss a cover that looks like this? So this book, I believe, is centering our main character, Carl, who is an ex-Coast Guard vet and is also stuck with his ex-girlfriend's show cat named Donut. This book is set in the aftermath of the end of the world, and like new alien overlords have arrived and humanity is basically there for the entertainment of their intergalactic rulers. Structurally, I believe this book is quite literally written like a dungeon. So it's a fantasy-filled world full of various traps. If you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, it just seems like our main character is going to have to work to overcome lots of different things. And in particular, I think he's quite literally participating in some type of game show-esque situation. This feels like, from reading the synopsis, it's going to be quite funny and over the top while also having a lot of action and adventure. I'm very curious about it. It's incredibly popular. And again, I'm so confused that I've never even heard of this series, but you know what? I'm here now. I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully this will be entertaining. The next book I picked up just sounded like such a fun combination of things, and that book is Of Monsters and Mainframes, and this is described to be a combination of pulp horror and sci-fi. Essentially, we're following our main character, who is a spaceship, and this spaceship is just trying to do its job, which is shuttling humans from point A to point B, but unfortunately, her humans keep dying. And despite the fact that like the medical bay is just telling our main character that these humans are dying due to medical reasons, they don't believe it one bit. And after doing their own investigation, they realize that a vampire is on board, quite literally Dracula. So now our main character, who is again a spaceship, is teaming up with some other unlikely figures, ranging from a werewolf to a pharaoh with otherworldly powers and another vampire with a grudged look. A ragtag group of individuals working alongside each other to take on a dark power. I am sold. This also sounds like it's going to be rompy and fun. I also like that it kind of has elements of a closed door mystery because it's all going to take place on this one singular spaceship. So I don't know. I feel like this could be quite the page turner and a really fun combination of like fun and horrifying. So, only one way to find out. The last book I picked up sounds like it's going to be very, very emotional and quite a shocking and impactful read, and that is Flashlight by Susan Choi. Susan Choi is a National Book Award-winning author, and this is her newest release that sounds like it's going to be rather intense, spanning not only multiple characters, but multiple timelines, ultimately weaving together this tale of one family. The story opens up with Louisa, our main character, who's 10 years old, walking along the beach with her father late at night. He has a flashlight in his hand, and her father cannot swim. Fast forward, we find Louisa once again soaked to the bone, but alone, with her father nowhere to be found. From there, we begin to learn more about this family. Louisa's father is Korean, but raised his entire life in Japan, but ultimately decide to move and relocate to North Korea. Louisa's mother is named Anne. She was raised in America in the Midwest, but after a falling out with her family, also decided to move. And then lastly, we have Tobias, who is Anne's illegitimate son who reappears within this family's life. But after, again, the disappearance of Luisa's father, it's now just Luisa and Anne together in their mutual grief. It says they cannot escape the echoes of that night, but what really happened to Luisa's father, shifting perspectives across time and character, turning back again and again to that night by the sea. Flashlight chases the shockwaves of one family's catastrophe even as they're swept up in the invisible currents of history. I personally really love family dramas and ones that also center a multitude of different characters from that family. I also love that this has a timeline that doesn't seem to be linear, and I'm also really curious about the historical implications of the setting and time period as it impacts these characters too, kind of a macro and micro experience. The early reviews of this seem to be very strong. It really just called out to me when I saw it in the bookstore, and it also had a really nice staff recommendation, so I decided to grab it and see for myself. Alrighty guys, that is my rather massive book haul. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down below some books you've picked up recently, as I would love to know, and I will see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye!